Long ago in the European countryside, there lived a woman and her husband. Their beautiful and quiet home was nestled among rolling hills and sprawling green pastures. They hoped to someday raise a child of their own. From the window of their living room, the luscious landscape stretched out far into the distance. The woman spent her calm hours sitting by the window, dreaming of the baby she might someday have. She would also gaze longingly at the garden that lay next to their land. This neighbor's garden was full of life. Neatly organized sections of flowers created a mural of vibrant color. Herbs sprouted across the earth, and ivy trailed along a red brick wall. The widow living on this neighboring land had a way of making things grow, or so it was said. On warm days, when the windows of the house were open, the fresh smell of basil and rosemary wafted into every room of the couple's home. The air danced with the sweet scent of roses and pink fuchsias, soothing every corner of the house. The woman envied the widow's agricultural abilities. Her own garden was bare in comparison. Though she tended to it for long hours, she could barely grow weeds. One day, the woman was lounging by the window, gazing down into the neighboring garden. It was almost noon, and the air was warm with sunshine. From the open window, she inhaled the sweet scent of lavender. She watched as a blossom tree swayed gently in the breeze. As she slowly spread her gaze over the beautiful garden, she noticed a small bed bursting with bountiful rampion. Rampion, the woman knew, had a rather unique taste. Though pungent and strong, it was also sweet and delicate. The woman had been unable to grow rampion in her own garden. As she looked at how fresh and green it appeared, she longed for it. All at once, she was overcome by a desire to eat some of the luscious rampion. Images of eating rampion as a child flowed through her mind. Her mother used to serve young, fresh rampion roots in a salad with pepper and vinegar, or she would boil the plump older roots and serve them hot with a delicious lemon butter sauce. As these memories floated by, she realized she had not eaten rampion in quite some time. As she carried out her usual daily business, her desire for the rampion never faded. If anything, it became insatiable. By the next day, the woman could think of nothing else. Perhaps it was because she knew she could not have it. Or maybe her body was telling her that this precious plant was what she needed most. That afternoon, The woman's husband noticed her intently gazing out the window. He came and stood beside her. Staring out, he saw the rampion for himself. The woman told him she hadn't eaten any for years and would truly love to taste it again. She said perhaps it was exactly what their longed-for baby needed. The man loved his wife very much and wanted to make her happy. He also longed deeply for a child. So later that afternoon, the man went to the widow's house, passing by the full and lush garden on the way. When he knocked on the door, the widow answered, appearing beautiful, wearing fine clothes and jewelry. The man explained that his wife hoped to taste rampion again after so long. He asked if he may take her some from the garden. The widow smiled kindly and said, of course, the man must take as much as he liked. The widow escorted him through her vibrant garden. The man could feel life entering his body as he walked along the fertile soil. He explained that they hoped for a child. The widow promised to send all her best wishes to his wife and their hoped-for child. Having gathered a handful of rampion, he thanked the widow and returned to his wife. She at once made a rampion salad and ate it, savoring every mouthful. It tasted better than she ever remembered. The next day, she told her husband that she craved it again. So he returned to the widow's house and asked if he might take his wife some more rampion. The widow happily obliged. She told him that the child they longed for would be born, and that the rampion's special qualities made this possible. As it was her rampion his wife craved, the widow hoped to have a say in the child's upbringing. Peering out the window at the couple's house, she said this was not the place the child should spend all her time. She offered to bestow on the child a great tower where the child might play in peace with all the space the child could wish for. The man was unsure, but knew his wife truly desired the rampion and felt the kindness of the widow. He agreed to honor the widow as the child's godmother. Sure enough, the woman bore a child months later on a cool, calm morning. As the heat of the day gathered and the herb-scented breeze wafted through the open windows, the widow came to see the newborn. She said, this child should be called Rapunzel because of the most wondrous rampion plants that aided her birth. The couple agreed. It was a fitting name for this healthy, glowing baby girl. As the child grew, so did her shining golden hair. It was long and thick, like hill grass. So long that her mother didn't know what to do with it. She plaited it and folded the braids over Rapunzel's head in the Austrian way. She trimmed it weekly, and still it grew. Just like the rampion, in the widow's garden. The widow took Rapunzel to the tower she had kept especially for her and gave her free rein over the intricate stone structure. It was fit for a princess. On the hottest summer days, the cool stone of the building provided relief and also insulated Rapunzel from the coldest winter storms. The winding staircase that led up the top of the structure curled in a seemingly endless spiral. Rapunzel loved to trail her fingers along the smooth, polished wood of the handrail as she climbed up the tower. When the widow played with Rapunzel, they devised a game that was only theirs. Rapunzel would climb to the top of the tower, where a broad window arched across the stone. From the ground below, the widow would call up to the child, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The child would unfold her flowing locks, fashioned into long braids that would reach right down to where the widow stood. Strengthened by the rampion, the child's hair was strong. So strong, in fact, that the widow could climb up the outside of the tower using only Rapunzel's hair as a silken rope. Rapunzel had the most beautiful golden hair. She would wind it around a hook by the window and giggle at the game as the widow reached the window and tumbled inside the room. The pair would laugh and play for hours. Together, the family lived happily for another 6 years, with barely a need for anyone else. Rapunzel was a happy child, and she grew up with everything she could want. She wandered in the widow's garden freely. She would sample the sensuous herbs and plump vegetables, especially the rampion, which always seemed to grow back taller and fuller than before. One day, the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. As he rode by, Rapunzel began to sing her favorite song. The sweet melody traveled from the open window and danced like fairies in the forest air. On hearing the sweet song coming from the tower, the prince stopped and listened intently. Entranced, he followed the gentle sound of this most beautiful voice to the high tower. The prince wondered who could be so high in this tower. The voice was so beautiful. He determined to find out who it belonged to. As his horse nuzzled its nose through the long, luscious grass, the prince daydreamed to the lullaby of the song. After a while, he rode home, still humming the melody softly to himself. As the desire for rampion had once lingered in the woman's mind, so did Rapunzel's voice remain with the prince. He returned to the tower day after day, hoping to hear it again. One of these days he was sitting against a tree, his loyal horse chewing the succulent grass beside him. He noticed an old lady approach the tall stone tower. Watching intently, he heard her say, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." To the prince's amazement, a beautiful young woman appeared at the highest window of the tower. She opened the window, and out tumbled long braids of flowing golden hair. The prince continued to watch as the lady then climbed the tower using Rapunzel's strong hair. The prince longed for the beautiful young woman and the sweet song he had heard her sing. He decided to arrive a little earlier the next day and try to play the same game himself. He felt irreversibly drawn to this enchanting young maiden and knew of no other way to reach her. So, the next day, the prince arrived and stood at the foot of the tower. He called out in a soft and gentle voice, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The window creaked open in the morning sun, and like a waterfall of gold, out fell braids of shining hair. The prince gazed at it in wonder. He gave it a little tug, and finding this did the young woman no harm, he began to climb this natural ladder. As he climbed through the window, the two locked eyes. The prince was not like any man Rapunzel had ever seen before. She had lived all her life in the country with her mother, father, and godmother. She wasn't expecting to see a young man climbing up to her window that morning. She had expected the widow. Even though the prince's voice had called to her, she thought it was just part of the lady's game. She hadn't thought for one moment it would be someone else. Despite the surprise, she was not afraid. The prince had such a soothing presence. He described how her song attracted him like creatures are drawn to a piper. Having lived only in the countryside, Rapunzel loved hearing about the prince's royal lifestyle. Rapunzel was happy to sit in the tower and talk with the prince, but she still knew little about him. So when he suggested they marry, she became shy and fell silent. This was something she would need to speak with the widow about. The prince said he would let her think it over. He left the tower, collected his loyal horse, and rode home enchanted with thoughts of the beautiful woman he just met. The widow came to the tower only moments later. Yet Rapunzel did not want to play their game. Instead, Rapunzel told her all about the prince and his hasty proposal. The widow smiled and said she knew how to see if the young prince had a true heart. The widow took Rapunzel back to her mother and father's house and explained what had happened. The widow said, "Rapunzel is now a woman, and it is time to do away with childish things. If the prince truly loves you," she continued, "he will still love you without your long golden braids." Her mother and father agreed. So together, they sat Rapunzel in an old wooden chair. With a pair of linen shears, the three of them held Rapunzel's long, thick hair and cut it until it only reached the middle of her back. The next day, Rapunzel waited for the prince to come by. She saw him tie his horse to a tree and gaze up at the tower. She admired his good looks, but remembered what her godmother told her. His heart is what really mattered. Arriving at the tower, the prince called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." But the window didn't open with Rapunzel's golden hair flowing out of it. Instead, Rapunzel simply walked from the side door of the tower and stood before the prince. "Here I am," she said. The prince looked at her for a moment, surprised to see her standing there. She told him about the widow's rampion, which had made her hair grow so long and beautiful. She told him about the game she had played with the widow, and that now it was time for her to grow up. The prince said she was beautiful, and that he wanted nothing more than to marry her. Rapunzel told the prince they must have a long courtship to each discover the other's heart. So the pair grew together with the guidance of the widow and Rapunzel's parents. The king was pleased to take Rapunzel as his daughter-in-law. The prince reported that he had never experienced feelings so strong before, and he felt them grow inside him like the tallest trees in the forest. The lady smiled, knowing now that his heart was full of love. The pair enjoyed quiet walks through the forest together, riding horses and listening to the birds sing to one another. They sometimes walked in the widow's garden and admired how easily her plants grew and thrived. The widow was generous with everything she grew, and she would send the prince home with baskets full of herbs and flowers. The king quickly developed a liking for these. Eventually, he invited the widow to the castle for the finest feasts and tranquil tours of the castle grounds. Rapunzel and the prince married when Rapunzel was 25. The wedding was splendid and joyful. People came from miles around to attend. The couple took up home in a beautiful chateau, a short walk from the castle. When it came time for them to bear their own children, the widow brought Rapunzel woven baskets full of rampion, which still grew abundantly in her garden. Rapunzel found the taste of the rampion all at once familiar. Indeed, it tasted like home. Rapunzel bore 2 beautiful babies. Each had long, flowing golden locks, braided and strong, just like their mother. Rapunzel's mother loved to meticulously brush out the thick, strong hair for hours as she sat with the children on her lap. She would sometimes trim it in a neat line with the silver shears, as she had done once with Rapunzel. Their hair always grew longer and fuller, day after day. And sometimes the children played in the tower with the widow, just as Rapunzel once had. Rapunzel and the prince felt the greatest contentment with their lives. As the widow grew older, she showed Rapunzel how to grow the most vibrant and luscious rampion in her own garden. Rapunzel tended to the plant every day. She would sit by her own window and watch the rampion grow, with the scent of roses and sweet blossom filling the air. And even though she was now a mother, every so often Rapunzel would let down her hair. It would flow from the open window, caressed by floral scents in the soft, gentle breeze.